Boys and girl, I just finished my first proper EU5 Holland playthrough where I went full on playing tall just to test how feasible playing tall is, and there's a lot to digest and get through, so pay close attention because if you're interested on playing tall in EU5, how it works, how well Holland does at playing tall, then this is the video for you. Also, EU5 is around the corner, so if you plan on pre-ordering or just want to buy it after the game is released, consider using my link in the description. You get a code that you redeem on Steam, so this is not a separate platform or anything. This is a Steam code that you get from the Paradox website, and I get a commission on every purchase, and you can use this link whenever you want. You can use it now, you can use it after the game is out, it's up to you. Just consider using my link. I really would appreciate it very much. Thank you for considering it. Now, Netherlands starting situation is fairly unique actually. I had a playthrough as Holland and then I unified the nation of Netherlands surprisingly fast. I want you guys to comment below, tell me how fast do you think I unified Netherlands. What year do you think I unified it in? You ready? I'm gonna give you the answer. Make sure you type in, pause the video, type in your answer, see if you were right or not, because boys, I unified the Netherlands in 1352, basically 20 years into the campaign, and it wasn't even a chat. I didn't even struggle to do it. That's because you only need 28 locations to unify the Netherlands, and you already start with 8 locations, so you just need 20 more as Holland. Brabant actually starts with more if I'm not mistaken. In any case, I attacked Utrecht, Gelre, Frisia in the first few years, and then I could form the Netherlands. So let me use Microsoft Paint to illustrate what my borders were by 1356. I basically had all of this. So you start with Zealand as a subject too. I had all of these parts by that particular point. They also took Gelre, took this part from Cleves, so I took it from Gelre afterwards, and there you go. That was my border. Now, right there, that was my Dutch border, Holland, and then unified into the Netherlands. Now, around 200 years, I did not expand outside of this. So I did unify super fast, but I wanted to test how good it is, how viable it is to just play tall. So what I did with the rest of the Dutchlands, well, Flanders just never stopped being a subject of France, and I just could not fight France, which is one of the most overpowered nations, so I just could not get my hands on Flanders regardless. Brabant, as well as Hainaut and Namur, I actually got in personal unions. So I did have Brabant, I did have Hainaut and Namur, and also Hainaut ate all of Liège. So my southern border was basically this. Pretty much what you would expect from the Netherlands. I had the Netherlands without Flanders. But the southern border this year was all junior partners. I never integrated them, at least not within the first 200 years. So this was a proper playing tall campaign, right? Some things to point out about playing tall, and I'm going to discuss what it means to play tall in EU5 shortly, as well as what are some of the best ways to do it. And then I'm also going to talk about how, in my games, how it played out, right? First off, what is playing tall? Obviously, min-maxing whatever you can out of the provinces that you start with, or have limited expansion and make the most out of your provinces. That is a very simple way of putting it. There's a lot more to it in EU5 compared to EU4, because it's not just about your development. Development plays into it, of course, but the main measurement in EU5 is not development. In fact, it is, let me write it down here, base tax. Yeah, that's right, buddy. That's right. You didn't expect that, did you? It's tax more than development. Of course, development plays into it because provinces or locations that have higher development are just overall better, because more development means lowered building cost, increase the amount of buildings that you can have without penalties in a location, increases the size of the RGO, increases migration attraction, lowers proximity cost, increases population capacity too, food production, supply limit, market attraction, institution growth, even character life expectancy. So if you have a character that's based in a location with really high development, he's likely gonna live for longer. You even have construction speed increase. I think it's about 1% increase per development. So if you have 25 development, you have an increase of 20. If you have 100 development, you have 100% construction speed increase. It's really, really good. So more development is obviously ideal. It's very difficult to get development, especially early on in the campaign. You can do it through two ways. You have to either give a privilege to the burghers, namely the urban development privilege, which increases innovative value by 0.10, and it increases monthly development by, hear me out, 0.001. That's it. You get 0.001% development per month in your provinces. To be fair, this privilege gives it until the rest of the campaign, because ideally you will never cancel this privilege. And then there's other ways. Prosperity also increases your development. So there's other percentage modifiers that modify upon prosperity, and this particular privilege is increased and so on. The idea is you want to have development, but the main reason why you want to have development is because you can get more base tax with it. So yeah, that's the big boy right there, because your base tax tells you your economic potential as a nation. And despite a small size land wise, you can have base tax that's 10 times the size of Muscovy. Clear example. Let's do another paint here. In the year 1400, I had 320 base tax as the Dutch. Obviously, this does fluctuate because in every game, nations will do better or worse. But just to put into perspective things, the Muscovites had 244 base tax. That's it. Let's call it BT. The Vijayanagaris had you don't want to know this one. They had 2,401 base tax. I'm just gonna say that India is insanely overpowered. We're gonna tackle that a little bit more in a different video, because I think I need to do a dedicated video for India, because it is really a special breed of part of the world. They've got really high development. They've got all the resources in the world. They have an insane amount of population, and we're gonna get into that in a few moments, because obviously population is another reason what influences your base tax. You cannot have base tax without population, because how do you get base tax? Well, base tax is in essence the amount of money that you can produce from your buildings. And how do you produce that? With pops. So more population, the more base tax you have, because more people you employ in buildings, which give you that particular base tax. Now, there's a lot of things that also influence this, because, for example, control. If you have 60 base tax in a province, but you only have 10% control in that province, then what happens? Out of 60, you only get 10%, which is 6. That's it. You get 6 base tax. You don't get 60, which is bad. So you want to have high control. The problem with the Indian subcontinent is because they have really high development, and that helps them get higher control. And because they have higher control, they get more of their base tax actually taxed. They get actually in their coffers more of that base tax, whilst you don't get that because you don't have the control. So that's one of the reasons why the Indians are insanely overpowered. But I believe that they're going to nerf that with the next patch. So keep an eye out. I'm going to have a video after the next patch is applied, and then I'll let you guys know how they nerfed or not nerfed India. Let's see what happens, right? Now, for England, to put things into perspective, England had all of their English island possessions, as well as they had most of Normandy, and they kept Aquitaine but by 1400, okay? So they were not a weak England, because in this patch, England is usually the one that wins the 100 Years' War. It's not the French. Again, something that's likely going to get patched. Let's see. France was just nerfed into the ground with the previous patch, and I'm sure they're going to address that very likely in the next one, because it's a known issue. Whatever the case, their base tax was 411, okay? So to put things into perspective, England is 7 times my size, locations wise, and I've got almost the same amount of base tax as them. That's crazy. That's actually crazy. What does that mean though? It means we're back in business, boys. That's right. Playing toll is all the rage. All the kids are doing it, and we're gonna sell them all those playing toll tools that they can use to play really toll. What are the tools, you ask? Well, good question. I've gone ahead and I've created what is likely the worst paint map ever, but it's gonna make a lot of sense in a few seconds once I explain it. Take a deep breath, okay? This is all interlinked pretty much, and the way in which you manage all of these different aspects of your country results in either you playing toll and playing more optimally, or playing wide and not necessarily focusing on your provinces as much as painting the map, right? Which I guess you could say playing wide would be. Take note, you can of course for a specific period of time play wide and then change to play toll. That's also doable. Like I said, in my particular campaign, in the first 20 years I was expanding, so all of this is just in the first couple of years. I expanded like crazy, so that was playing wide technically. I didn't stay in my starting provinces, and then after I just did nothing for 200. I did not expand even in the New World. I didn't even try to compete colonially with with the rest of the colony, with the rest of the colonial nations. Actually, I did after 200 years. That's why I said 200 years. So around the 1600s, I started doing some colonial shenanigans too. I went into South America, which had some parts that were not yet colonized. North America was 100% colonized by the British. That's it. The British had colonies there in the 1600s. I think there was a little bit of islands colonized by Castile, and that was pretty much it in North America and Central America, basically. South America was a little bit more free. There was also some Lombardian colonies, surprisingly. Lombardy, who would have thought, right? And there were also Portuguese colonies, as you would imagine, as well as very unique amongst pretty much everything I've seen. A single location managed to be a Bretonian. That's it, just one location. They couldn't do better. It is what it is. They did actually expand from one location after the 1600s. They actually, I think, fought a couple of wars against the Portuguese. But anyway, that's aside from the point of this video. Some of the biggest limitations I had in playing Toll in the lowlands was building capacity. So once you reach your building capacity, the problem is that it's going to get a lot more expensive and not as efficient building more in those locations, right? So that's why that's one of the reasons why development is important, because more development means more building capacity in your provinces. And getting development, again, from early on is that privilege, as well as you can assign a cabinet member to actively increase development in a province. But that takes time, and then you have one of your cabinet members occupied. You can still do it, though. It's not a bad idea. It's probably a good idea if you're playing Toll, in fact, obviously. And to be fair, the 5,000 that I had was also after I integrated Brabant and Hainaut. So I probably could have done a lot better. I had, I think, more than France in 1600 base tax, which is not bad. Now, getting back to this particular screen, what is this all about, right? So first off, development affects a lot of different things, like I explained already, and it goes straight into base tax because it affects buildings, it affects population in the sense that you can have more pops in that province. It affects control because of the proximity reduction that you get from a higher development, which means you can have more control, which is why I'm going to leave development under the red tag, and in the same red tag I'm going to add control, because again, without control you don't get enough base tax. It is literally scaled with the control that you have in your locations. So you can have 1,000,000 base tax, but you only get as much as you have control. Next up is buildings, because buildings represents your potential base tax. Potential base tax, in essence, is the combined effort of RGOs, that means the raw resources extracted from a location, as well as the buildings that are selling their goods on the market. Now, if you also have burgers in a location, and that goes into the population screen, burgers trading also to the market can also increase your base tax, or better yet, potential base tax, because the base tax again is as a result of control. So I probably should rephrase everything in potential base tax, which turns into actual base tax after control. So these are the four main pillars here. Now, the other ones are not red. We're going to make them yellow. First off, estates and privileges we're going to make yellow because it affects the red thingies. So it affects development with the privileges you can get more or less. It can affect your control because certain privileges can increase or reduce your control or proximity, which in turn means, again, more or less control. It affects your population because certain privileges could affect, say, for example, how many pops migrate to your country or leave your country or convert or assimilate or etc. Then we're going to have laws, because laws are basically the same like estates, but laws are something that you change a little bit less often. And once you have a set of laws in motion, the main thing that you're looking for with laws is passive modifiers for other values. So that means, for example, you can increase estate satisfaction equilibriums, or you can increase values. So laws technically go towards estates and towards values. Values, in a nutshell, are how you define your nation. There's a set of values right now, and it depends on what country you're playing as. You might have more or less values. There's certain values that spawn later in the campaign, like absolutism spawns later, free trade and mercantilism spawns later in the campaign. There's certain religions that have specific laws, like the Muslims have jurisprudence, and the Asians also can have their synicizing values. No, I'm butchering that. Basically how Chinese they are, pretty much. Anyway, so values are not easy to move, but moving values really can help you have either a more playing toll society or not so playing toll. There's usually two spectrums for values, and let me see if I can find anything on the Tinto talks that I can show you guys. I found a really old old Tinto talk where we see, for example, centralization, decentralization. Some of these are basically the same. Some have been changed. However, for example, centralization doesn't have the control importance modifier anymore, which doesn't exist at all actually anymore. And at 100% centralization, you get crown power plus 50%, maximum war exhaustion, proximity cost, and counter espionage. So it's basically all the same stuff, right? The idea with this is, for example, moving towards 100% centralization is the most important thing in the game, honestly, because crown power basically affects a lot of things. It gives you a lot of bonuses or debuffs if you have low crown power, and proximity cost also is a massive value that impacts how much control you could potentially have in your provinces, or better yet, locations. You want to stack as many proximity cost modifiers and of course as many control modifiers if you can, which is a lot more difficult to do. Now with the values themselves, you can get bonuses that allow you to have higher development, more control, increase the amount of population, and heck, even affect your buildings, which, for example, capital economy lowers the cost of your buildings by 10% at maximum, increases your production efficiency, which, as you would imagine, also afterwards goes into getting more base tax out of your buildings eventually. On the opposite spectrum, if you're more into population, your values could also increase the population capacity, with traditional economy, the opposite of capital economy, giving you 25 max population cap, as well as raw material output plus 20%, which again goes into the base value. I'm realizing this is a very bad graph that I made right here. This is really, really bad. I should not be doing this, should I? The last one here, and I'm going to put this into orange, is cabinet, because cabinet can directly affect everything pretty much. They can change your values straight up. They can add towards a specific value. They can increase your control, which in turn means you get more base tax. They can increase your development. They can even get more pops in your country. And as you advance and you get new technologies, you have more interactions later in the campaign that you can use your cabinet members for, which again end up with you having more base tax, which means having a better playing toll nation. So coming back to my Holland campaign, I'm gonna say that I actually had a lot of fun as Holland. It was probably one of my top campaigns I've played so far. It made me learn a lot more the game, and it made me learn some challenges that I'm gonna have when playing the game later in the campaign. For example, later in the campaign, the little ice age triggers in 1640, something like that, and it's brutal, okay? If you don't have enough food, your population is just gonna die, and I mean really die. Speaking of that, going back to the actual image of Holland, because we got to talk about this, okay? Holland's a very special nation. It has a lot of potential. It really can outshine everybody when it comes to playing toll that I've seen so far. I haven't played all nations. I only have a few hundred hours in the game. So obviously, as I play more nations, the more I discover, the more I'm going to change my opinion. Keep that in mind. I don't want you to be afterwards. Game is out. You played for a couple of months. You're like watching this video and you're like, Ludi, wow, you don't even know this country's better than Holland to play toll. Okay, buddy. All right, I'm sure I'll have the same opinion at that point in time, okay? In December or whatever. Anyway, so the potential is there, okay? There's a lot of unique buildings that also add to that potential, such as the polders, the Dutch polders, which is a obviously very Dutch building. Initially, after you've researched the Dutch polders, which is in the Age of Renaissance, the second age, you can build 2 Dutch polders in all of your wetland provinces, and they reduce road building time by 5%. They increase population capacity by 2.5%, food production by 5%, and monthly development growth by 2.5%. So you can stack these up. Sure, initially you can only build 2. Later you get some more flavor incoming, so you can expand upon the polders. You can have a lot more polders built, which means that the lowlands become some of the highest development areas in the world by default by building this unique building. And you get a lot of food, you get a lot of population capacity, so you can obviously outshine most other locations in the world. But take note, early on in the campaign, food is going to be an issue. So personally, I want to thank certain other creators, namely Chewy, because he told me, because he played before I played Holland, how tough it was with food. And the first thing I did when I started my Holland campaign is I just spammed, after I conquered the Utrecht and Gelre, which has a lot of wheat provinces, I just maxed out my wheat RGOs. So that's a lot of provinces. So I believe believe TL, which is this province here, Nijmegen, Clef, all three of these are wheat provinces. And then also Camphor over here and Deventer are also wheat provinces. I believe this province here is livestock. So wheat and livestock are the best ones to expand when it comes to food, because wheat and livestock give you 8 food per RGO. So in TL, for example, I remember I had around 10 wheat from the start of the campaign. 10 wheat, which means 80 food from one location alone, which is more than enough to feed a lot of your population, right? But because you are within a market, a lot of that gets taken away, which makes me go to the second thing. After I got most of my lands, so after I unified the Netherlands, I created my own market. You do start a part of the Bruges market, which is a really good market, but the reality is you want to have your own market so you can more easily regulate certain things such as food. So you don't need to worry that some other nations within your market which are doing really silly things are just wasting all the food from the market, and you have to import food because they're not doing it, and you end up just losing a lot of money because of that. Eventually, once I got Brabant and everybody else, it was a lot easier to control all of these things. But yeah, also making your own market is kind of meta, because the more provinces in a market, the more spread out a market is, the less access the peripheral province and the peripheral locations will have, and as such, it's going to be not the smartest idea. Kind of right now, at least, the meta is to have as many small markets around, make sure they're fully stocked, fully supplied, so they all have decent market access, and as such, it's easier to build up your economy if you have all the resources available on the market, of course, which you should have. That's kind of the whole idea behind this, right? Now, going back to the Little Ice Age, this hit me like a freaking wrecking ball, okay? Because I had a pretty decent food situation. I was importing from other parts of the world, and actually, here's the problem, right? I was importing from other parts of the world. And why was I doing that? Because I kind of maxed out everything in my country. I had all the RGOs maxed out. All the other provinces that I had were already towns, or well, by 1600s, they were all cities. So if we go back to here, the only provinces that were not cities were the wheat, livestock, and the one fruit province. I think this one is the fruit province, or is it this one? No, it's this one. This is the fruit province. So the fruit location and wheat and livestock locations were the only ones that I kept as rural locations. Everything else was made into cities, and I had insane amount of populations in all of these cities. I maxed out my Dutch polders. I maxed out my irrigation, which again gives you more food production. I basically did everything you could possibly do, but because my population was so freaking high, I did have to rely on imports from other parts of the world. And during the Little Ice Age, which is a situation that happens later in the campaign, food production is severely diminished because of the, the Ice Age. It's a little, but it's still an Ice Age, okay? And during that period, it's kind of sad, but a lot of the pops are gonna die around the world if they don't have enough food. I did have close to enough. I did still lose a little bit of pops. I didn't have as much starvation as other parts of the world had, but the reality is that I realized later in the campaign, no matter how tall you play, having certain direct access to certain raw materials is really, really vital later in the campaign. Early on, it's not as big of a deal because, you can make up for it easily by producing locally, because you're gonna have enough pops to employ, and you're gonna have enough space to build more buildings in your locations, right? Well, pops is never an issue. You always have pops to employ, but the amount of location building slots, that's the actual problem. Also, getting better advances which allow you to upgrade buildings later on makes a massive difference. For example, a level 1 weaponsmith, which becomes a weapon workshop in the third age, the Age of Discovery, is gonna have obviously way better outputs than a level 1 building. Similarly, in Age 5, you get the weapon manufactory, which is again way better than the previous 2 tiers. And then in Age 6, you get the weapon mill, which is insane. So for example, a single weapon as a produced good in the first tier building, there is actually 3 production methods for this first tier, but one of them that gives an actual one weapon straight up costs 0.5 lumber, 0.3 coal, and 0.5 tools, okay? And you just get one weapon basically. Whilst for the last level, the weapon mill, for 0.3 coal, 0.3 lumber, and for 1 steel, you get 4 weaponry, which is a massive difference, okay? That is a huge difference. That being said, it does cost 1,200 to build the 4th level one compared to 50, which is how much the first one cost. But because you're limited with the amount of building slots, obviously obviously you want to upgrade to that later tier because it takes up the same one slot, the same like the first tier does, and it just produces significantly more, so you get more base tax off of those goods being sold to the market. One more thing I want to mention is that populations absolutely adore high development provinces, okay? Now, obviously the fact that you also have a lot of jobs available, you have a lot of satisfaction in those provinces helps into it, but development helps overall so much. Like, once I started developing my province, so the first few playthroughs I did, obviously I didn't know how to properly play toll. I learned as I went along, and once I realized the meta and how to quote unquote rush, you don't really rush development. It's a very slow process, but within a few hundred years you get it up there, okay? Once that's done, it is like it's like the gold rush, okay? It's like everybody that has the ability to migrate to your provinces will be migrating to your provinces, and it just becomes so satisfying in the 1650s. It is insanely satisfying to see how you go from literally 200,000 pops at the start of the game, the start of the campaign. They started with 212,000 pops. You go down to 100 after the plague kills off half your population, and then you go to 10-15 million by the later parts of the campaign with the same amount of provinces, simply because you've built up an insane economy. And yeah, you see these kind of lines all over your country coming from other parts, going into the more desirable locations. It's nice. I actually really enjoyed it. Now, I'm also curious to know what other campaigns you guys want me to do and talk about. I've got another Castile AR coming up, and I've got a Hansa / Banking Nation AR. So this one I started playing as Hansa. I haven't finished it yet, but it's going to be done tomorrow probably. And I also did a mini campaign as a Banking Nation. So I'm going to add both of those in the same video so I can give you guys an idea how exactly they're being played and what's different about them and what's fun, what's boring, etc, etc. Also, I've got another Japan Daimyo campaign. So these are the ones you're going to expect in the next few days. And yeah, let me know what else you want to see. If you have any questions, I will answer your questions in the comment section below. I am allowed to answer anything you ask me right now. And before you leave, don't forget to use my code if you plan to get the game. Just keep it somewhere. Keep a link there somewhere if you want to buy it later also. Anyway, appreciate you guys. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one.